Okay, the second part of looking at this is to look at and examine organisation structures and what is the purpose of them. We'll look at this bit and then we'll look at how strategies are developed. So this is the example of a structure. This is just one that I googled ages ago, which I just put on there. This is for a private sector company. So the first questions we've got to ask is actually, what is the purpose of a structure? Now, it can help an organisation achieve an objective. So following on from what we talked about with SMART objectives, the simple fact of the matter is an organisation structure is there to help achieve an organisational aim. And that aim could be quite broad and varied, but it's there to basically get that aim shared between people. It's also to help inform people of roles and tell them what they're doing. It's also to highlight their responsibilities. What responsibilities do they have? Obviously, a manager will have different responsibilities to a cleaner in a company. It also is to allow for effective communication across a business. So basically that means transmission of ideas, transmission of that objective, that whole idea of a SMART objective. Is it shared between people? Is a very important part of an organisational structure. We need to go through some basic keywords of what each bit does. So I'm going to explain this chart. This is part of Coke, but I'll just explain what the bits are. At the bottom, you can see the different functional areas. So that's like strategic planning, marketing, public affairs, business development, finance, and also the different parts. At the top, you see the GB president. The span of control is actually really the bits underneath him. Okay, so these parts underneath him, which I will scribble. I'll scribble here. These parts underneath, I'll scribble in a different colour to make it. So it's basically everything underneath this man is his span of control. So the GB president has control over all these different people. So the marketing director, strategic planner, and all of that. He has control over it. That's what span of control is. The division of work. So for example, that's actually not shown directly, but it does show you that you have a finance director, but you also have a PA, public affairs and communications director, that divides the work up. So you can see that there. And also you have different lines of communication. So for example, the finance director can speak to the GB president and vice versa. It does have that. Okay, so basically, why would an organisation be shown or shown to do vertically? What are the pros and cons? Well, really, the pro of a vertical organisation structure is the fact that an organisation can essentially organise itself by having clear roles. Usually, this is quite what we call a hierarchy. So it's almost like a pyramid, a bit like the army, or like a school or a college, where you have someone at the top, like a principal, and then you have people going underneath it. So you have at the bottom, you have students, and you have each layers. It is clear structure, and it does designate roles and keep things quite open. The negative is that if you have so many layers to go underneath, your message can get lost, and that can lead to poor communication. It can also lead, as a negative in a lot of modern workplaces, to what we would call silo working, so people just working on their own little bits, where they're not actually contributing to the whole. That can cause quite a lot of problems as well. But still, the vertical or horizontal structure or hierarchical structure is still really it's used quite readily. So this tool structure is used quite readily in business still, especially over very large businesses. To be fair, a lot of different organisational structures do exist within organisations, and we'll look at that later. So a business might actually use several different types of structure to get its message across. A flat structure, which is more positive, which is, well, happening now a lot more. Usually this would involve having less management and having it being flatter. The idea is to improve communication. Obviously the negative of that is that many people can actually become quite stressed. Roles can be unclear and become muddled. It has to be done quite effectively, but the idea is you have a very flat structure where people can work within it, and that can cause some issues as well. Equally, organisations like SGS, Coke or whoever it is, most organisations which are big are organised in terms of geography, so basically geographically. This means they have different roles and different functions at different parts. So for example, the college has different roles at different sites. So SGS Filton does all the academic side and the construction side, but Y specialises in art and sport. Queen's Road focuses on things like art. So they have different areas and different things. SGS Stroud provides pretty much a very similar range of courses, but obviously in Stroud. Basically, you have a geographical structure to meet the needs of a different local community and to meet the needs of the people below it in that community. It's depending what the business is, but usually that's the reason why you have a geographical structure, and that is there to, it's really designed to help you or help the business to adapt to that local environment, and that's why it's been designed. So we're going to look at how they're basically used in two organisations and just give you a basic overview. So geographic, this is an example of Coke actually, to be fair. If you look at the top, that is Coke's worldwide structure. Let's see if we can get a better colour. That's Coke. That's their structure all around the world. So you've got Latin America, European Union, different places. If you look in the European Union, as it's organised geographically, again, you have Northwest Europe where Britain is. And then you have you actually have the British office. But if you look, it's actually got quite a big geographical structure across different areas and different regions of the world, because it's a global business. The reasons are obviously you're going to have completely different tastes and different, different needs in different areas. So, for example, Latin America, there might be more demand for certain types of Coke than there are in Europe. They might have less types of Coke in Latin America than they do in Europe because of taste being different, and also culturally as well. There might be some things in Europe which haven't taken off in, let's say, Africa, which Coke use. So, for example, they might sell more Diet Coke in Northwest Europe than they do in Africa, because of basically you have different customer needs and different cultures within that. And that can go for all manner of different companies. But also equally, in terms of infrastructure in Africa, you will have a completely different infrastructure. I can guarantee in Africa they will not have as many roads or have as much infrastructure as they have in Europe. As a result, you will have a more developed team, a more developed structure within that European organisation. So, for example, let's take an internet connection. You're likely to have a digital marketing team within that marketing department in Europe. You probably would have one in Africa as well, but in reality, how much bigger is that team going to be in Europe, where you have a higher adoption of internet usage? It's an observation, it's not saying anything negative or positive, it's an observation. That is the reality of why you have different structures for different countries. Coke have done that so they can organise themselves properly. And then you've also got the functional areas of Coke as well, which you've talked about. Now, these functional areas will give you different, will help organise a business so it meets different people's needs and also meets the business's objectives, because that's the goal. So, for example, in a private sector company, you might have something like finance. They're the ones who deal with the money coming in and money going out, and they keep control of that. Marketing, the people who actually listen to their customers, and also not just that, react to customers, but also develop promotions and develop ways of engaging customers to make sure that the brand is well known and it's actually going out there. Production, obviously the making of the Coke, which obviously needs some kind of input. Customer service, what you're delivering, so for example, maybe the distributor of the Coke or something like that, or people complaining about the Coke. Sales, people who are selling the Coke or going out to places like Wetherspoons trying to flog it. Human resources are the people who deal with it. The reality is all these areas are actually interdependent on each other. So for example, if you don't have good finances, you can't actually make a good product, so that impacts on production. If you're not making sales, it impacts on finances. If you want to hire people, for example in human resources, you need to have money for that. In terms of marketing, you need to listen to you would have to marketing and customer service, for example, will also work quite closely together, because they need to know what customers are saying about the products, what are the complaints. So it could be a problem with a can or a production fault. But all these areas are interlinked with each other. Your job in the assignment will be to explain how they're interlinked with each other, because they all do different roles. You need to explain that. Okay, so we're going to look at a public sector organisation now, and obviously SGS because you know it. For example, this is the different sites, again like Coke, very similar, looking at different areas and examining different things, because they're basically aimed for different cultures and different ways of working. Also, they're looking at different students' needs, and they're looking what the resources are there. So for example, SGS Queen's Road is basically by an art gallery in the centre of town. SGS Wise is by a set of playing pitches, because it's a sports facility. It is aimed at basically delivering a service which each site is specialist in, and that's what's going to happen. This is an example of the senior leadership team at SGS, and this is how it's organised vertically. This is also in your workbook as well, which we will go through in the lessons, and this shows you basically how the college's leadership is done. It does have a vertical structure, however there are not that many lines of there's not that many lines to get to the top of the actual organisation. It's not as many as there were, but there's still some significant layers of organisation within it. You do have slightly different sections and different functional areas in a college. So for example, you have whereas finance and human resources, you also have quality. They're the people who look after the quality. They go and observe teachers, but they also try and listen to the students' views, and they think about the quality of the courses and the quality of the provision which is on site. Learner services are the ones who try and look after like your pastoral needs. So you do have some slight differences. Again, they are all interlinked, okay, and you need to explain what those interlinks are. Okay, so each of those areas are interlinked. You just need to bring it out. The final section of the assignment really looks at how these organisations and these structures are actually focused on really how they achieve an aim and how they achieve a strategy. Now, really, it's how an organisation, you should really think about that in the sense of how does a structure communicate a message, and I think that's the part you should really try and emphasise when you go into the assignment. It's basically how does a structure, how does a smart objective, how does that smart objective get achieved by a structure. So how do the functional areas help it achieve it? How does it achieve it geographically? How does that hierarchical system try and achieve it? these little videos should help you a little bit, and I hope it gives you a good heads up. Thanks very much.